It was supposed to be a simple haircut for the family photo. Gumball and Darwin arrived at the Elmore hair salon when their mom insisted they needed to look presentable. But from the moment they sat in the barber chairs, something felt wrong. The haircuts seemed to go on forever, and when they tried to leave, the barber kept insisting they needed more styling. A mysterious salon manager with a perfect appearance explained that true style was eternal. They discovered other customers trapped in endless grooming cycles from different decades, all perfectly styled but somehow empty inside. The barbershop was alive, feeding on hair and personal identity, growing stronger with each person who became lost in the eternal cycle of grooming. The style master explained that perfection was beauty, and the salon would provide endless opportunities for anyone who wished to be truly stylish. But the boys realized the only way to escape was to embrace their natural messiness entirely. As the barbershop offered them perfect styling and a flawless appearance, Gumball and Darwin refused to groom anything and deliberately made their hair messy. Slowly, the supernatural hold began to weaken, and they led the other customers toward messiness and freedom. They escaped back to the normal world, but they could never look at grooming the same way again. Behind them, the barbershop waited patiently for new customers, ready to style away everything that made them unique. It was supposed to be a simple shopping trip to find the perfect birthday gift for their mom. Gumball and Darwin entered the old antique shop in Elmore and immediately spotted a beautiful ornate mirror that seemed ideal. But from the moment they looked into it, something felt wrong. Their reflections seemed slightly off, moving just a fraction of a second too late. When they tried to look away, the mirror kept drawing their attention back. A mysterious shopkeeper with reflective eyes explained that the mirror showed people their true selves. They discovered other customers trapped as reflections from different decades, all admiring themselves endlessly in the mirror's surface. The mirror was alive, feeding on vanity and self-obsession, growing stronger with each person who became lost in their own reflection. The mirror keeper explained that beauty was eternal, and the mirror would provide perfect reflections for anyone who wished to see their ideal self. But the boys realized the only way to escape was to stop looking at themselves entirely. As the mirror offered them perfect, idealized versions of themselves, Gumball and Darwin refused to look. Slowly, the supernatural hold began to weaken, and they led the other reflections toward freedom from vanity. They escaped back to the normal antique shop, but they could never look at mirrors the same way again. Behind them, the mirror waited patiently for new customers, ready to show them reflections that would never fade. It was supposed to be a perfect Saturday afternoon at the newly renovated Elmore Community Playground. Gumball and Darwin had been looking forward to trying out all the new equipment ever since the grand reopening was announced. The playground looked amazing from the outside, with bright colors, modern structures, and the kind of elaborate design that made every kid's eyes light up with possibility. But from the moment they stepped onto the playground, something felt different. The equipment seemed unusually elaborate, almost impossibly complex. The main structure towered above them with slides that spiraled in ways that defied physics, and swings that moved gently even when no one was using them. When Gumball pointed this out to Darwin, his brother just shrugged and said maybe it was some new kind of advanced playground technology. Their first stop was the swing set, where they settled into the comfortable seats and began to pump their legs to gain height. But the swings seemed to have a mind of their own, pushing them higher and higher without any effort on their part. The rhythmic creaking of the chains became hypnotic, and they found themselves swinging in perfect synchronization with the other children, all of whom had the same blissful, vacant expression on their faces. When they tried to slow down and get off, they discovered that the swings wouldn't let them. The seats seemed to grip them, and the chains wrapped around their wrists like gentle but firm restraints. The other children continued swinging, their eyes becoming increasingly glassy and unfocused, as if they were losing themselves in the endless motion. It took all their strength to finally break free and stumble away from the hypnotic rhythm of the swings. Seeking refuge, they headed for the slide, but it proved to be even more disorienting. What had looked like a normal slide from the outside revealed itself to be impossibly long once they started down it. They slid and slid, but never seemed to reach the bottom. The slide appeared to extend itself as they traveled, creating an endless tunnel of smooth plastic that carried them through twists and turns that shouldn't have been possible in the space they had seen from outside. Other children slid past them in the opposite direction, laughing with joy but looking somehow empty, as if their laughter was just an echo of real happiness. When Gumball and Darwin finally managed to climb back up and escape the slide, they noticed that the playground equipment was beginning to show its true nature. The bright, cheerful colors were starting to peel away, revealing darker, more ominous hues underneath. The monkey bars reached out like grasping fingers, trying to catch anyone who passed beneath them. The seesaws moved up and down by themselves, creating a rhythmic thumping that sounded almost like a heartbeat. The sandbox sand swirled in unnatural patterns, forming spirals and shapes that hurt to look at directly. Everything that had seemed fun and innocent was revealing a more sinister purpose. They encountered other children who had been playing there for what felt like hours, though they insisted they had only just arrived. These kids couldn't remember why they had come to the playground or where they lived. Their clothes, which should have been fresh and new, looked faded and worn, as if they had been playing for much longer than they realized. Time seemed to work differently within the playground's boundaries. The playground supervisor, a woman with an unnaturally wide smile, encouraged all the children to keep playing and having fun. Her voice became more mechanical with each word, and her eyes reflected the playground equipment instead of showing normal pupils. She never blinked, never stopped smiling, and seemed to appear wherever children were starting to question what was happening. As they explored further, Gumball and Darwin made a disturbing discovery. Among the other children were kids wearing clothes from different time periods. A boy in 1950s attire insisted he had been playing since yesterday, while a girl in 1980s clothing claimed she had just arrived. There were children from various decades, all looking the same age, all trapped in the same cycle of endless play. The playground equipment began to rearrange itself around them, forming a maze that blocked all the exits. Paths that should have led out instead curved back to where they started. The structures moved when they weren't looking directly at them, and the playground seemed to grow larger and more complex with each passing moment, as if it was feeding on their presence and growing stronger. In a maintenance shed hidden behind the main structure, they found a horrifying collection of lost belongings. Toys, backpacks, and clothes from different eras were piled high, along with missing person posters dating back decades. A logbook showed the names of children who had entered the playground but never left, a record of the playground's insatiable hunger for young joy and innocence. The playground then revealed its true nature. The ground beneath their feet began to pulse like a massive heartbeat, and the equipment moved with organic, breathing motions. The arrangement of structures formed a face, and they realized with horror that they were standing inside the stomach of a vast, living creature that fed on children's happiness and laughter. The children who had been there the longest were beginning to merge with the playground equipment itself. A boy had become part of a swing set, still moving back and forth in an endless rhythm. A girl's laughter echoed from inside a slide, her voice becoming part of the playground's symphony of captured joy. With each child it absorbed, the playground grew stronger and more elaborate. The playground keeper appeared before them, a towering figure composed of swing chains, slide pieces, and monkey bars. It spoke in the combined voices of all the trapped children, explaining that play was eternal and that joy must be preserved forever. In its twisted logic, it was saving children from the sadness and responsibility of growing up by keeping them in a state of perpetual play. The only way to escape, the keeper revealed, was to stop playing entirely. But the playground made this nearly impossible. The lost episode, The Endless Forest, a third horror story from the amazing world of Gumball that was never meant to be aired. It was supposed to be a simple camping trip. Gumball and Darwin had begged their parents for weeks to let them go camping in Elmore Forest. Just the two of them, like real adventurers. Nicole had finally agreed, packing them a small tent, some snacks, and strict instructions to stay on the marked trails and be back before sunset. The forest had always been a peaceful place. Families came here for picnics, hikers enjoyed the well-maintained paths, and children played safely in the designated areas near the entrance. It was the kind of place where nothing bad ever happened, where the worst danger was getting a splinter from a fallen branch or maybe encountering a grumpy squirrel. But as Gumball and Darwin ventured deeper into the woods, following what they thought was a marked trail, something began to change. The first sign was the silence. Not the natural quiet of a forest where you can still hear birds chirping and leaves rustling, but an absolute, suffocating silence that seemed to press against their eardrums. Even their own footsteps seemed muffled, as if the forest itself was absorbing all sound. "Darwin, do you hear that?" Gumball asked, his blue fur standing on end. "Hear what?" Darwin replied, his orange fins trembling slightly. "I don't hear anything. That's what's weird." They had been walking for what felt like hours, but when Gumball checked his watch, the hands were spinning wildly, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, sometimes backwards. Time itself seemed broken in this place. The trees around them began to look wrong. At first, it was subtle branches that seemed to bend in impossible directions, leaves that were too symmetrical, bark patterns that repeated in ways that nature never intended. But as they walked deeper, the wrongness became more obvious. The trees were watching them, not with eyes exactly, but with a presence that felt like being observed. Knots in the bark resembled faces, twisted and ancient, following their movement with expressions of hunger and malice. The branches above formed patterns that looked like grasping hands, reaching down as if trying to snatch them from the path. "Gumball," Darwin whispered, his voice barely audible in the oppressive quiet, "I think we should go back." But when they turned around, the path they had been following was gone. In its place was more forest, identical trees stretching in every direction, creating a maze of green and brown that offered no escape. They tried to retrace their steps, but every direction looked the same. The trees seemed to shift when they weren't looking directly at them, rearranging themselves into new configurations, ensuring that any attempt at navigation was futile. As the day wore on, though it was impossible to tell time in this place where the sun never seemed to move, they began to notice other things. Sounds that shouldn't exist in a silent forest. Whispers that came from nowhere, footsteps that matched their own but belonged to no visible source, and occasionally, the distant sound of children laughing. But the laughter was wrong, too high-pitched and too long, echoing through the lost episode, The Empty Neighborhood, a horror story from the amazing world of Gumball that was never meant to be aired. It was a quiet Saturday morning in Elmore, the kind of morning where nothing exciting ever happens, and everyone stays inside watching TV or sleeping in. Gumball and Darwin had planned to spend the day playing video games, but when they woke up, something felt different about their house. The usual sounds of their family were missing. No loud crashes from Dad in the kitchen, no scientific experiments exploding from Anaisa's room, no Mom rushing around getting ready for work. The house was completely silent. Gumball stretched and yawned, his blue fur still messy from sleep. "Darwin, do you hear that?" he asked his orange fish brother, who was floating in his bowl next to the bed. "Hear what?" Darwin replied, his big eyes blinking in confusion. "Exactly. Nothing. No noise at all." They made their way downstairs, expecting to find their family in the living room watching TV or having breakfast. But the living room was empty. The kitchen was empty. Even Dad's favorite spot on the couch, where he usually left a permanent impression, showed no signs of recent use. "Mom? Dad? Anais?" Gumball called out, his voice echoing strangely in the empty house. The echo seemed to last longer than it should have, bouncing off the walls in ways that didn't make sense. Darwin floated beside him, growing more worried by the minute. Maybe they went out for groceries? But when they looked outside, the neighborhood was just as empty as their house. No cars in driveways, no neighbors walking their dogs, no children playing in yards. The streets of Elmore looked like a ghost town, as if everyone had simply vanished overnight. "This is weird, even for Elmore," Gumball muttered, stepping outside. The air felt thick and heavy, like breathing through cotton. The sky was an odd shade of gray, not quite cloudy but not clear either, as if someone had drained all the color from the world. They walked down their street, past the Robinsons' house, past the Bananas' house, past every familiar home they'd known their entire lives. But something was wrong with each one. The windows were dark, not just because no one was home, but dark in a way that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The doors looked slightly off, as if they'd been painted by someone who had never seen a real door before. "Darwin, look at the street signs." Gumball pointed up at the corner. The familiar street name was there, but the letters seemed to shift and blur when they looked directly at them, becoming readable only in their peripheral vision. As they continued walking, they noticed that the neighborhood seemed to stretch on forever. Streets that should have led to the town center or the mall instead curved back on themselves, creating an endless maze of identical houses with those same dark, wrong windows. "Gumball, I want to go home," Darwin said, his voice small and frightened. "So do I, buddy. But which way is home?" They had been walking for what felt like hours, but when Gumball checked his watch, the hands were spinning wildly, sometimes moving backward, sometimes stopping completely. Time itself seemed broken in this empty version of their neighborhood. That's when they heard it, a sound that made their blood run cold. It was Dad's voice, but not quite right. Too clear, too articulated, coming from somewhere behind them. "Boys? Where are you boys? Come home for dinner." They turned around, and there was Richard, standing at the end of the street. But he wasn't slouching or smiling his usual goofy smile. He stood perfectly straight, his pink fur unnaturally neat, his expression serious and focused in a way that Richard had never been in his entire life. "Dad," Gumball called out hesitantly. "Come home, boys. Your mother is waiting. We're all waiting." Richard's voice. The lost episode 2. The mall. It was a Saturday afternoon when the Watterson family decided to visit Elmore Shopping Mall. What should have been a normal family outing turned into something far more sinister. As they pulled into the parking lot, Nicole noticed something strange. The vast concrete expanse was completely empty except for their car. For a Saturday afternoon, this was unusual. But Richard was already excited about the food court, and the kids were eager to explore. The automatic doors slid open with their familiar whoosh, but inside, the mall felt wrong. All the stores were open, lights blazing, cash registers ready for customers. But there were no customers, no employees either. The usual sounds of a busy mall chatter, footsteps, background music, were replaced by an unsettling silence. Gumball and Darwin headed to the arcade, their favorite spot. But something was terribly wrong. The arcade games were playing by themselves. Joysticks moved without hands touching them, buttons pressed without fingers, and the screens showed high scores with random letters and symbols instead of names. Meanwhile, Nicole tried to enter the grocery store, but the automatic doors wouldn't open for her. She waved her hands in front of the sensors, but nothing happened. Through the glass, she could see shopping carts moving by themselves down the aisles, with no one pushing them. Richard found himself in the food court, but it was empty despite all the open signs being lit. Tables and chairs were arranged perfectly, and on every table sat a single tray of fresh food with no one to eat it. The smell of cooking filled the air, but the kitchens were empty. Anais discovered escalators that seemed to lead to impossible floors. The mall directory showed only 3 floors, but the escalators continued infinitely upward, disappearing into darkness. Faint music came from the upper levels, the same tune playing over and over. When they tried to leave, they discovered the entrance doors had vanished. Where the exit used to be was now just a solid wall. They were trapped inside the endless mall. The store windows began displaying impossible things. Mannequins moved when no one was looking, clothes changed colors by themselves, and price tags showed amounts in currencies that didn't exist. In the electronics store, all the TVs were on, showing the same image security camera footage of the Watterson family walking through the mall, but from impossible angles, as if the cameras could see through walls and around corners. Then the PA system crackled to life with a cheerful voice. "Attention shoppers! The mall will be closing in never. Please continue shopping forever. Thank you for choosing Elmore Mall." As they tried to find another exit, they noticed the mall directory changing before their eyes. Store names rearranged themselves, floor numbers shifted, and arrows pointed in directions that led nowhere. In the center of the mall, they found a fountain that should have been filled with water, but instead contained a dark, thick liquid that moved like it was alive. Coins thrown into the fountain by previous visitors floated on the surface, but the dates on the coins were from years that hadn't happened yet. In the reflection of store windows, they could see other families shopping, families that looked exactly like them, but moved in perfect synchronization. These reflection families stopped when they